Texas Senator Ted Cruz is calling for the federal airline mask mandate to be lifted for fully vaccinated individuals before the July 4th holiday, suggesting Biden's CDC, quote, follow the science. This, as public health officials in LA County recommend that everybody, regardless of vaccination status, mask up over concerns about the Delta variant.
International President of the Association of Flight Attendants, Sara Nelson, joins us to discuss all of this now. Welcome, Sara. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Can we just start on the Delta variant? What are your concerns and the concerns that you're hearing from flight attendants around the country based on the science that we know right now as it pertains to the Delta variant?
Well, we follow science and we deal with communicable disease in transportation. We have for decades, and we know that we have a really significant role to stop the spread of any communicable disease. So right now, the federal mask mandate is in place for transportation, and there's a reason for that. Even outside of the Delta variant, children do not yet have access to the vaccine. People who have been vaccinated may be able to protect themselves, except with this new Delta variant, but they can spread it. And we also are part of international travel. We don't even have the airline industry fully back up and running again. We don't have access to all that international travel. We don't have business travel back. And so the mask is a very critical part of layering safety. And as we know from science, it's rich that Ted Cruz is mentioning science here, that the masks are the most key component in helping to stop the spread of the virus. Now with this new Delta variant, we have to all really buckle back down again and understand what we've learned. We've been led to believe that we can't trust the public, that we can't trust our leaders. And Ted Cruz is continuing that dialogue. And what that's doing is just creating conflict in our country, making people feel that they're at odds with each other instead of mobilizing a national response like we have in other crises.
Sarah, I just, on a follow-up note, I think a lot of people are probably wondering then, where does this end? And you got into some of that, what we would need to see internationally, what we would need to see down the line. But a lot of people are probably sitting back and saying, listen, I'm vaccinated. Most people I know are vaccinated. When does all of this end? What are the clear benchmarks that you're looking for?
Well, it's fairly clear. We are working also really hard with the Biden administration now on a TRIPS waiver, which is a waiver of intellectual property, so that we can produce the vaccine and distribute it around the world. There are places around the world that only have 0.5% of the people who have been vaccinated. And the reality is that as long as the virus exists anywhere, we're all in jeopardy. So we have a long way to go in terms of travel and the international network to be in a place where we are safe and where we can pull back on some of these procedures. I think September would have been probably a very good time to take another look at this based on the vaccination rates in the United States. But as this Delta variant is coming into play, there are more concerns, and we need to really take this very seriously and look at what's happening with the rest of the world. The one thing we cannot do in aviation is have people be concerned that if they buy an airplane ticket, they're going to be unsafe. People have to take safety for granted when they buy an airplane ticket. So we know this is about our health, but we also know it's about our economic security.
What I'm curious about is whether the federal mandate actually matters at this point. If, let's say, the CDC today was like, you know what, Ted Cruz, smart as always, no more mandate for airlines. Do you think any airlines would lift their own mandates? Because as private companies, they could say, look, if you want to fly on American Airlines, you have to mask up. Or are there some budget carriers that might say, you know what, this is our shtick. We're going to appeal to people who don't want to wear a mask on their flight?
Well, frankly, some of the budget carriers have been some of the best in enforcing those mask policies. But the idea here is that we don't want to make safety a competitive issue. And we would be in danger of doing that if we lifted the federal mask policy. the federal government still has restrictions for Europeans to travel to the United States. As long as we are trying to mobilize a national effort to reconnect with the rest of the world and this pandemic, there really has to be federal leadership around this so that we're not in jeopardy of having a safety item become a competitive issue. It's very important. You know, flight attendants don't like wearing the mask either, and we have a lot of different views and ideas among our ranks. All of that gets checked at the door when we come to work, and we have to enforce the safety standards that are in place. So having that one set of safety standards that's led by the federal government gives clear communication to the public, to the people on the front lines who are enforcing those regulations. And we all know what to expect. You don't have a patchwork of issues here where it's confusing from one flight to the next or one airline to the next. That's why it really has to be led by the federal government. And we said that from the very beginning. It was missing until President Biden was sworn in. But now that we have that backing, we can be a lot more clear, and it makes it a lot easier for us to do our jobs.
Now, reportedly, you're dealing with a spike in unruly passengers, and I'm curious as to what part the masks play into that. I mean, is a lot of this frustration and pent-up anger sort of exploding over the cultural issue of the mask?
Well, look, let's be clear. The masks themselves are not a problem. People have been led to believe that these are a flashpoint, these are a point of conflict, and they're a symbol of that conflict narrative that has been created. But what we find is that it's really not the masks. They may be a flashpoint, but people are drinking alcohol. Alcohol is a major contributor here. Almost every single person who's coming to the plane door is a first-time flyer. And people have been really holed up in their homes or giving people space. And now all of a sudden we're packing them together on full flights because we don't yet have all of the airplanes back up in the air. So it's really about the conflict narrative that's been created and the disparate communications that have come from leadership that are leading to these conflicts. And then that mask has been made a symbol of that.
And to your point about all of the planes not being in the air yet, Americans are facing flight delays and cancellations as the nation's major airlines grapple with staffing shortages after the industry spent a year laying off workers. The staffing shortages come as Americans start to return to normal and air travel returns to pre-pandemic levels. What responsibility does the industry have for this shortage that people are talking about?
Ryan, I want to be really clear. In March of 2020, airline demand fell by 97%. Almost overnight, airlines were in jeopardy of going out of business after they had been making billions of dollars. Our unions put together a plan for COVID relief that was based on keeping people in their jobs, connected to their health care during a pandemic, and most importantly, keeping them connected to their safety certifications, their security background, because we said when that demand returns, if you don't do that, it's going to take years to recover. So there was a lapse in funding from October 1st to the end of December, and that's what we're seeing right now. We're seeing the ripple effect of that because not everyone is back and trained. Take American Airlines, for example. That's just 20 pilots that they didn't have. And then American took the step to proactively cancel 1% of their schedule. Imagine what it had been if we hadn't had that payroll support program in place and we hadn't started calling people back at the beginning of January, getting them retrained. Those numbers would be astronomical, and essentially the air travel would not be available. So the payroll support program worked. The fact that Congress let it lapse during a period of time is why we're seeing these problems now, but it would be much, much worse if we had not had that in place during the relief.
And speaking of that trajectory of how things can get worse or may continue to improve or continue to get worse in some respects, I think a lot of people are frustrated seeing this from a heavily subsidized industry, but I'm wondering where you think this goes from here, because it seems like maybe it's not getting back to normal, it's getting to a new normal. And what does the timeline look like on that, and what might look different from what the industry looked like in January of 2020?
Well, first of all, yes, we're going to be a smaller industry for a little while, but airlines are already putting in place plans to hire. And they're doing that, but they can't really move forward with that until we have the industry normalized. And that means getting back access to all of that international travel. So the longer we wait on that, the longer it is for the airlines to start ramping up that training and that hiring so that we can be ready for the full demand of air travel. It's coming back for sure. There is no doubt about that. But there are some key components that have to get in place here. First of all, we have to end the pandemic. We can't allow this Delta variant to get out of control and send us in the opposite direction. We have to keep wearing those masks just like they are around the rest of the world. And it's really important that the U.S. government can say to the rest of the world, you can trust us because we're using all of the highest safety standards. And we're not allowing transportation to help continue this pandemic, to spread it. That's really critical. Also on our planes, we have to really take care of our most vulnerable passengers. And right now, children do not have access to that vaccine. There are some people who medically cannot take that vaccine. And that's why when you see in this space an added level of safety and security, when you come into my workplace, you have to practically undress to show that you're not a security threat. You can't bring your gun or your knife. And when we tell you to put your seatbelt on, we always say put that on for your own safety and the safety of people around you. We don't say if you believe the seatbelt's going to help you put it on. We command no, you have to put it on, because if we hit clear air turbulence, you're going to hit the ceiling, and when you come down, you're going to hurt everyone around you. It's the same logic with the masks.
And Sarah, while we have you, can I get your response? What do you think, what does the AFL-CIO think about the Biden administration's two-track infrastructure strategy? Do you agree with Democrats that both of them need to go or neither goes?
Well, look, we have got to be robust in the infrastructure plan, and I think that we have to be realistic about the fact that we have got a 50-50 split in the Senate. And so we've got to keep trying every possible way to get this infrastructure bill passed and to get as much resources out into the public to create good jobs and also rebuild all of our infrastructure. We're seeing buildings falling down. We're seeing bridges falling down. We don't need to look like a third world country here when we're the United States of America. We need to invest and make sure that we're creating good jobs. At no other time have we needed that more. And this is the time really to move away from an Eisenhower, 8.0 to really the Biden 1.0 and move forward here. And so they've got to keep trying to get those votes and put pressure there and put out a clear plan about what it could be so that the public knows what we're trying to achieve here and continue to build that political support. But they also have to keep talking and trying to convince others to come to their senses about putting together an infrastructure plan that's really going to rebuild our country and fit it for the new world that we're facing and the existential threat of the climate crisis.
Sara Nelson, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Coming up, we address Tucker Carlson's claims that the NSA is spying on him.